Your hand will hold me still, even when my world is shaking. Your hand will hold me still. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. I'm fearfully and wonderfully made.
3, 2, 1, 0. Hello, welcome to Theology Chat with Chumpy. It's Tuesday night, so it's time for our chat. What we do with this, if you've not watched this before, is what we usually do, I should say, is we try to define some theological terms and concepts from Sunday morning sermon, or we answer questions that come up from the sermon. So if you have a question, feel free to send that to Pastor Melissa or to myself, and I will try and address that on Tuesday night. Or if something comes up and you think of a question tonight, you can put that in the comments, and I will try to address that when it comes up. If I can't, I will try and get information to you later, or maybe go over it next week. However, we're doing things a little bit differently this next so many weeks. We started our Moses series last week, so this is the second week of the Moses series. And so what we're doing is we are, on Sunday mornings, we're kind of going 100 miles an hour through the story of Moses. And so what happens is we're not going to be able to hit everything on a Sunday morning, every part of the story. So what I'm trying to do on Tuesday nights is kind of fill in some gaps that maybe we missed on a Sunday morning. So that's what we're doing. So with that, we're going to jump in. But if you do have any questions from the sermon or from tonight, feel free to throw them on the comments, and I will try and address them as well. So we're going to jump in to the story of Moses. We finished off last week. We talked last week about the birth of Moses up to the point where he sees the burning bush. We didn't really talk so much about God calling Moses at the burning bush. And so I wanted to say a few things about that. One of which, God talks to Moses at the burning bush there, obviously. And one of the things that he's doing is he's telling him, I want you to go to the Israelites, tell them that I'm bringing them up out of Egypt. And I want you to go to Pharaoh, and I want you to tell him to let my people go. That's God's mission, basically, that he's giving Moses there. And one of the things that happens is Moses is like, well, look, I'm going to go talk to these Israelites, and they're going to say, who is this God that you're talking about? Like, who should I tell them sent me? And what God says, well, here we go. Moses says to God, suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, what is his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. Okay? Now this is important. First of all, that's pretty cool to just say, who am I? I am. But this is important for us to remember, because when we go back to, or when we get to the New Testament, there are several times that Jesus kind of uses that wording, I am, to kind of signify who he's talking about. He's saying, this is who I am. Like, I am this same God that you all have known ever since Egypt. So I feel like we need to remember this part of the story when we come to Jesus, so that we can be aware of that wording, because it's important. So that's one piece. Another piece of this encounter that Moses has at the burning bush is, frankly, Moses didn't want to do it. Moses didn't want to do the job. He kept telling God that he's got the wrong guy. Kind of has a similar story to Pastor Melissa and myself, where we're like, whoa, I don't think you got the right person for the job here. He tells God, he says, well, first of all, God says, okay, I'm going to be with you. I'm going to show signs of power through you. And one of the things that he does, he says, Moses, you got a staff that you carry, right? And he's like, yeah. Okay, well, throw that on the ground. So Moses throws his staff on the ground, and it turns into a snake. And God tells him, okay, pick it up by the tail. So he picks it back up, and it turns back into the staff. Well, this is something that he does back when he goes to Egypt to show Pharaoh. And I'll come back to that later. Another thing is, God says, okay, now stick your hand in your robe and pull it out. And when he pulls his hand out, it's covered in leprosy, which is a big deal. Back then, leprosy was like a much bigger deal than it is today. It can be treated now. And actually, FYI, leprosy is still around, in case you didn't know that, but it's treatable now, and so it's not as big an issue as it was back then. But then he says, stick your hand back in your robe, pull it back out, and his hand was healed. These are just signs to Moses to say, look, I've got you. Like, I'm calling you to do this, but I'm not sending you out on your own. Like, I'm giving you power to do what I need you to do. And so even with all that, then Moses comes and he says, okay, look, God, I am not eloquent of speech. I am a slow talker. Some people say that they think Moses was a stutterer. And so he starts giving all these excuses to God why he can't do this. And so he gets down to there, and he finally gets to his point. Hi, Dad. He gets to his point, and it says, but Moses says, pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else. I mean, he's dancing around it, but he finally gets to the point there. And God says eventually, okay, fine, look. You have a brother named Aaron. Take him along with you. I will give you the words. You give them to Aaron, and Aaron will be your mouthpiece. All right. So this is what they do. Him and Aaron get together, and they go in and they talk to the Israelites. And it says they went to the Israelites and told them all about what God was doing. And when they heard that the Lord was concerned about them and had seen their misery, they bowed down and worshipped. So Moses brings this news, and it's good news for the Israelites because they've been under this yoke of oppression from the Egyptians, and they were just so happy that they bowed down and worshipped right then and there. So then the hard work begins. Moses and Aaron go to Pharaoh, and they ask, actually, if you read the story, it says they ask for 3 days to go into the wilderness to worship God. That's all they ask for. And Pharaoh comes back and he says, no, that's not going to happen. Let me pull the picture back up there. He says, that's not going to happen. And in fact, since you're being so lazy, you want to get away for 3 days. Now, what I'm going to do, I'm not even going to provide your people with the straw to make the bricks that you need to make. Because that was what the Israelites were doing. They were making these bricks for buildings. And so you still have to make the same number of bricks, but we're not giving you the straw. You got to go take care of that yourself. But you still got to meet your quota. And so obviously this is not, they've basically doubled the work of the Israelites in addition to not letting them go. And so this doesn't go over well with the Israelites. When the Israelites find out about this, it says when they left Pharaoh, they found Moses and Aaron waiting to meet them, and they said, may the Lord look on you and judge you. You have made us obnoxious to Pharaoh and his officials and put a sword in their hand to kill us. So then Moses returns to the Lord and says, why, Lord? Why have you brought trouble on this people? Is this why you sent me? Ever since I went to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has brought trouble on this people, and you have not rescued your people at all. Moses goes and does what God told him to do, and things don't turn out the way that he expected it to happen. And so a couple of things there. First of all, sometimes when you follow God, you have to remember that things are going to go according to God's plan, not yours. And so there's a lot of times that we come in and we say, okay, I'm gonna do what God wants me to do, and we have this idea in our head of how things are going to turn out. And sometimes they don't. Sometimes they don't turn out anything like what we envision. And we've got to kind of trust that God has things under control, trust that God has his plan and he's moving according to it. And so that was pretty much the case for the Egyptians, or the Israelites there. Like, Moses goes in and he says, God, look, I did what you told me to do. And now things are worse off than they were before. And so another thing I want to point out there about that is, don't be afraid to go to God and be completely honest with him about what you think is going on. He can handle it. I can remember several times where I've done the same thing, and I thought, God, I'm doing what you want me to do. Why is this happening? Or why isn't this happening? I expected this, and this is what's going on. And he can handle that sort of stuff. He would rather you be honest and then be able to address that than just walk away or just be resentful of it. And so Moses brings this stuff to God, and he tells him, well, here's what's going to happen. He's going to be bringing these plagues on Egypt. And so what happened then is, this is kind of where we get to the point in what Pastor Melissa was preaching on Sunday. She focused primarily on the plagues. And so I'm not going to recount all of that stuff, other than to say that she showed on Sunday morning how God brought each of these plagues to Egypt, and each one addressed a different god of Egypt. Okay, so it's God basically asserting himself over the gods of Egypt, and he's saying, I am above all of these things. And so you cannot stand against me. Like, the gods that you worship, that you think can keep you from me, I'm bigger than that. And so you're going to let my people go. And so each time this happens, God sends this plague, and Pharaoh hardens his heart. God sends another plague, and Pharaoh hardens his heart. It didn't have to happen that way. God could have said, let my people go. Pharaoh could have responded, okay, and let them go, and this wouldn't have happened. But, as we so often do, when God tells us one thing, we get stubborn, and, as the Bible says, harden our heart towards God, and we want to do our own thing. Pharaoh had power over these people. He didn't want to lose that power, and so he refused to let them go. And so, of course, we go through the 10 plagues there, like Pastor Melissa addressed on Sunday morning. I'm sorry, 9. We only did 9 on Sunday morning. We didn't get to the last one there. It was the one where the Nile turns to blood. There was the plague of frogs. That was Micah's favorite. He leaned over and he says, but I like frogs. There was the plague of gnats or lice. There's plague of flies. There was a plague where the cattle died. Plague of boils. Plague of hail. Locusts. It's little on my screen. It's hard to read. Darkness. And then that was the 9th one. That's all the further we got. Because next week we're going to be finishing this up. But we haven't got there in the story yet. But in chapter 12, this is when the 10th, the final plague happens. But in chapter 12, God says to Moses, and I will bring judgment on all the gods of Egypt. I am the Lord. That's what he says to Moses. So that just backs up this idea that each of these plagues is kind of an indictment and judgment on the gods of Egypt. So, in addition to saying, look, you got to let these people go, Pharaoh. Just to add that in there. So next week we're going to finish up the plagues with the big one, the 10th plague, which is the Passover, which is another huge part of who the Israelites are. And so we're going to spend a whole week on that. So that's what we're going to be talking about next week. And then after that, we're going to be heading out of Egypt. So tune in next Sunday. 10:30 a.m. services are in person and live stream. And then we also have 7 p.m. services in person. We're not live streaming the 7 p.m. But that's what we're doing. And so I will see you then.